I never imagined that a single weekend away from home would change me so completely. When my mother suggested I stay at Uncle Daniel's while my parents traveled for a business trip, I accepted without a second thought. To me, he was always the reliable figure, quiet, composed, someone who seemed content living alone. I thought it would be nothing more than a few nights in a different bed, maybe a chance to escape the suffocating monotony of my own life. I couldn't have been more mistaken. Daniel greeted me at the door with his usual warmth, a half smile softening his otherwise serious face. His house smelled faintly of cedar and something stronger, maybe cologne, clinging to the air like memory. He was taller than I remembered, or maybe I had simply forgotten the way his presence filled a room. His handshake lingered a second too long, steady and firm, as though he was grounding me in place before ushering me inside. The house reflected him perfectly, minimalist, ordered, touched with masculine elegance. Dark leather furniture filled the living room. Framed photographs lined the shelves, though most were landscapes rather than portraits. I noticed the absence of family photos, as if he preferred to keep his private life locked away. The silence inside was heavy but not unpleasant. It made me aware of every sound, every breath between us. He asked about my classes, my plans, my friends. I answered dutifully, though I found myself watching the curve of his jaw, the way his shirt stretched across his chest when he leaned forward. It unsettled me. He wasn't just my uncle, he was a man who carried himself with confidence, a kind of strength that demanded attention without a word. I tried to shake off the thought, ashamed of how my mind wandered, yet I couldn't resist studying him in stolen glances. That evening, we ate together at the dining table, a simple meal he prepared with surprising care. The conversation drifted from lighthearted stories to more personal revelations. He spoke about his younger years, his travels, the mistakes he made, and the lessons they taught him. I listened intently, drawn in by the richness of his voice, the intimacy of his honesty. It was strange. Our relationship had always been cordial but distant, yet now it felt as though invisible walls were dissolving. After dinner, Daniel poured 2 glasses of whiskey, insisting it was a family tradition to share a drink under his roof. I laughed at his phrasing, but accepted the glass, the amber liquid burning down my throat and leaving a warmth that spread faster than I expected. He raised his glass toward me, his eyes locking with mine in a moment that seemed to linger just past the edge of comfort. We settled into the living room, the low hum of rain against the windows filling the silence. He sat across from me, relaxed, one arm draped casually over the back of the couch. I felt his gaze land on me, occasionally heavy and deliberate, though he never spoke of it. My heart raced each time, though I feigned nonchalance, swirling the whiskey in my glass as if it were the only thing occupying my mind. I tried to remind myself who he was to me: family, blood, a line that should never be crossed. But something in the air made boundaries blur. It was the way his voice lowered when he asked about my life, how he listened with intent, how he made me feel seen in a way I hadn't experienced in a long time. The loneliness I carried from home, the disconnection from friends, the quiet longing for someone to understand me, it all seemed to surface under his attentive eyes. The night wore on. Conversation faded into comfortable silence. I stood to put my glass away, but as I passed him, his hand brushed mine, light, accidental, yet it sent a current through me that I couldn't explain. He glanced up with a half smile, as if testing whether I'd pull back. I didn't. My breath caught, and for a fleeting second, the room seemed smaller, the world reduced to just the 2 of us and the unspoken tension stretching taut between us. I retreated to the guest room soon after, unsettled by the intensity of the moment. Closing the door behind me, I leaned against it, heart pounding, unable to quiet the storm inside. I told myself it was nothing, that I was imagining what wasn't there. And yet, as I lay in bed, listening to the rain and replaying the brush of his hand against mine, I knew something had shifted. The weekend had only just begun. Sleep was elusive that first night. I kept replaying the brush of Uncle Daniel's hand, The way his eyes had lingered just a fraction longer than necessary. My mind was restless, caught between guilt and curiosity. By morning, I told myself it was all in my imagination, a trick of whiskey and silence. Yet when I joined him for breakfast, his calm smile and steady gaze brought it all rushing back. The hours passed quietly. He busied himself with chores around the house while I scrolled idly through my phone, pretending to be absorbed in nothing. But my attention kept drifting toward him, the sound of his footsteps in the hall, the way sunlight caught the lines of his face. I hated myself for wanting to notice. Still, the awareness clung to me like a shadow I couldn't shake. By evening, rain had returned, a steady drizzle tapping against the windows. Daniel suggested we watch something, and I agreed, grateful for the distraction. We settled into the living room, the television casting soft flickers of light across the space. I chose the far end of the couch, yet somehow the gap between us closed little by little. A shared laugh pulled us closer, his arm brushing mine as though by accident. I could feel the heat of his body beside me, and it left me restless. "Cold?" he asked, glancing sideways. His tone was casual, but his eyes searched mine. "A little," I admitted, though the chill I felt came more from nerves than the air. He reached for a blanket draped over the back of the couch and handed it to me. I pulled it across my lap, expecting him to retreat into his own space. Instead, he shifted closer until the edge of the blanket covered both of us. My breath faltered, my pulse drumming loud in my ears. We watched in silence, but I couldn't focus on the screen. Every detail of him consumed me, the warmth of his arm against mine, the faint scent of his cologne, the way his chest rose and fell in rhythm with his breaths. I told myself to move, to create space, but I remained frozen, caught between fear and desire. At some point, his hand rested lightly against my forearm. It was innocent enough, the kind of touch one might dismiss, but it lingered. I turned my head toward him, and he met my gaze without flinching. His expression wasn't playful or teasing. It was deliberate, weighted with something I didn't dare name. "This feels strange," I whispered, though I wasn't sure who I was trying to convince, him or myself. "Strange doesn't always mean wrong," Daniel replied softly, his voice low and steady. The words unraveled me. I should have pulled away, insisted on distance, but instead I leaned into the warmth of his touch. He shifted closer, his hand now firm against my arm, then my shoulder. The air thickened, silence pressing down like a secret waiting to be told. When his lips brushed mine, it was tentative, almost questioning. I froze, every nerve alight, my mind screaming of boundaries shattered. Yet my body betrayed me. I kissed him back, slowly at first, then with growing urgency. His hand cupped the back of my neck, steadying me as though he knew I might break under the weight of what we were doing. I wanted to stop, to push him away, but desire overpowered reason. Each movement deepened the conflict within me. The guilt of crossing a line and the undeniable pull of something I had longed for without realizing it. His kisses were both gentle and commanding, the kind that made it impossible to think, only to feel. When we finally broke apart, breathless, I stared at him, searching for shame in his eyes. Instead, I found only certainty. "You don't have to be afraid," he murmured. But I was afraid of what it meant, of who I was becoming in that moment. And yet, beneath the fear, there was something else, a dangerous exhilaration, a recognition that what had begun could not easily be undone. The night stretched before us, heavy with possibility, and I knew whatever choice I made next would change everything. The morning light crept through the curtains like an intruder, unforgiving in its clarity. I woke slowly, the rhythm of Uncle Daniel's breathing steady beside me, his arm heavy across my waist. For a moment, still half dreaming, I allowed myself to sink into the comfort of his warmth. Then reality struck, sharp and merciless. My chest tightened. What had felt inevitable in the night now loomed as something forbidden in daylight. I slipped out of bed carefully, unwilling to disturb him. The wooden floor was cold beneath my feet, grounding me in the enormity of what we had done. In the bathroom mirror, I hardly recognized myself. My face was flushed, eyes wide with both shame and wonder. I splashed water over my skin, hoping to wash away the guilt clinging to me, though it lingered stubbornly, stitched into the memory of his hands, his voice, his closeness. When I entered the kitchen, Daniel was already there, dressed neatly, as though nothing unusual had occurred. He moved with the same unhurried confidence, pouring coffee, humming under his breath. The domesticity of it unsettled me. How could he be so calm when my insides twisted with questions? "Morning," he said, sliding a mug toward me. His tone was easy, almost casual. I muttered a reply, avoiding his eyes. The silence stretched, heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. I wondered if he felt it, too, the fracture between who we were supposed to be and who we had become overnight. "Are you all right?" he asked eventually. His voice was softer now, tinged with concern. "I don't know," I admitted. It was the only honest answer I could manage. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded, as though he understood more than I dared to say. We ate breakfast quietly, our spoons clinking against bowls louder than any conversation. Every gesture, his hand brushing the table, the way his eyes lingered on me, was magnified, weighted with meaning. The day dragged on, each hour thick with tension. I found myself both drawn to him and desperate for distance. When he touched my shoulder lightly as he passed behind me, I stiffened not because I disliked it, but because I liked it too much. Desire and guilt braided themselves together until I could no longer separate them. By evening, I retreated to the guest room, though the bed felt foreign, cold without him. I lay awake, wrestling with my thoughts. Was it love, or only a mistake born of loneliness? The secrecy itself seemed to feed the intensity, making every memory sharper, every detail unforgettable. His voice calling my name, the way he whispered reassurance, it echoed in my head long after the moment had passed. On the last morning of my stay, Daniel drove me back home. The car ride was filled with small talk, traffic, weather, errands to run, but beneath the surface, unspoken words churned like a storm. When we pulled up outside my house, he turned to me, his hand resting lightly on the gear shift. "You don't have to carry this like a burden," he said quietly. "What happened, it doesn't have to define you." I swallowed hard, unable to form a reply. His calmness felt both comforting and unbearable, as if he had already made peace with something I was still struggling to name. I stepped out of the car, my legs unsteady. He didn't follow, only offered a faint smile before driving away, his figure shrinking in the distance until it disappeared completely. I stood there, rooted to the pavement, the weight of everything pressing down on me. Inside, the house was unchanged, cluttered, familiar, safe. And yet I wasn't the same. Every corner of me bore the imprint of him, of what we had shared in that quiet, forbidden space. I wanted to forget, to bury it deep where no one could ever uncover it. But I knew forgetting was impossible. Some moments brand themselves into you, refusing to fade. That night, lying in my own bed, I tried to convince myself it had been a single lapse, nothing more. But in truth, I knew better. A door had opened between us, and no matter how firmly I tried to shut it, the memory would always find a way back through the cracks. Was it love, or was it simply desire masquerading as something deeper? I didn't have the answer. All I knew was that I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and my life would never be quite the same again. The silence of my room offered no absolution. Only the echo of his voice remained, reminding me that some secrets are too heavy to carry alone, and yet some are far too dangerous to ever share. The days after my stay at Uncle Daniel's passed slowly, each one carrying the residue of what we had done. I tried to slip back into routine, classes, friends, family dinners, but everything felt altered, as though the colors of the world had dimmed. Conversations became shallow echoes, laughter empty. No one around me could see it, but inside I carried a secret that pressed against my ribs with every breath. At night, I lay awake replaying moments I shouldn't. The way his lips had brushed mine, tentative yet certain. The warmth of his voice in the dark. The steady, grounding weight of his hand at the back of my neck. These memories visited me uninvited, weaving themselves into my thoughts no matter how hard I tried to resist. Guilt surged alongside desire, creating a storm I couldn't escape. I told myself to cut him off, to let distance dissolve what had begun. But when his name lit up my phone one evening, just a simple message, "How are you holding up?" my resolve crumbled. I stared at the screen far too long before replying, "I'm fine." "You?" That single exchange reopened the door I had fought to close. Our messages grew more frequent. At first they were harmless, updates about his work, my classes, family matters. But slowly they shifted. He asked if I was sleeping well, if I was thinking about him. I admitted I was. It felt like confessing a crime, yet the honesty thrilled me. His responses were never careless. They carried a deliberate intimacy, a reassurance that what had happened between us wasn't just in my head. One evening, while walking home from campus, I called him. I hadn't planned it, hadn't even realized my thumb had hovered over his name until I heard his voice on the other end. "I miss you," I blurted before I could stop myself. The words hung in the air, reckless, irreversible. There was a pause, then a low reply. "I miss you too." That admission both comforted and terrified me. It confirmed what I had tried to dismiss, that this wasn't a fleeting mistake, but something deeper, more dangerous. The forbidden edge of it only sharpened the longing. I knew it couldn't be sustained, but I couldn't deny the way my chest tightened each time I heard from him. Weeks passed, and the tension only grew. I began to notice how easily a lie slipped from my lips when friends asked why I was distracted or when my parents asked if I had spoken to Daniel recently. Secrets became my second skin, cloaking me in equal parts thrill and dread. One Friday night, unable to bear the weight of it alone, I found myself on a bus heading back to his neighborhood. I hadn't told him I was coming. My pulse hammered as I stood at his doorstep, the memory of that first night flooding back. When he opened the door, surprise flickered across his face, quickly replaced by something softer, something that felt like relief. "You shouldn't be here," he said, though his hand lingered on the doorframe as if resisting the urge to pull me inside. "I know," I whispered, but I couldn't stay away. For a long moment we stood suspended in silence, the world outside falling away. His gaze held mine, searching, questioning, as though weighing the cost of what we both wanted. Finally, he stepped aside, allowing me in. The house smelled the same. Cedar, faint cologne memory. My chest tightened. Every corner of it reminded me of the line we had crossed and the lines we were about to cross again. Daniel closed the door quietly behind me. His expression carried both restraint and inevitability, as though he had been waiting for this moment while dreading it all the same. "Are you ready for what this means?" he asked, voice low, careful. I didn't answer. Instead, I moved closer, heart pounding, caught between fear and longing. And as his hand brushed mine once more, gentle, deliberate, I knew that whatever this was, it wasn't over. The night had only just begun again.